I wasn't particularly fanatical about cars or anything like that, not particularly interested in cars in fact. What I was actually trying to do is to prove myself in a competitive way, which a lot of young people get into sport for that reason. So I would have taken up other sports. In fact, if I hadn't been born in Essex, I would have probably been a skier. But the highest mountain in Essex is 250 feet, so that's not very good. Anyway, I quit in '66 and I had nothing else to do with racing. And then something happened while I was asked in 1990 to race again. And I don't know why they asked me. It was a particularly dangerous car to drive, and I think they'd started at the top of the alphabet and then gone down to W and finally got to me. And I couldn't resist the challenge because it was such a difficult car to drive. And so I decided to accept this, and I sort of immediately went into training and did all the things that you have to do that, because you have to be very fit to be a racing driver, believe it or not. And so anyway, the first race I did in this car, I was asked to drive this, and in my first race was in Paris and I finished third. In my second race, I finished second. In fact, this was my second race and I was leading the race, but I had a brake problem, and the guy who was just behind me there in a similar car won the race. And so I finished first, then second, and then the third race was coming up, was the biggest race of the year for this class of car. And so the ideal was, in my little dream, was sort of 3, 2, 1, and then quit again. So I really wanted to win that last race. And so anyway, I was very, very nervous, lots of internal obstacles, because I wanted that sort of perfection at the end. And so I stayed in the hotel room, didn't go to the racetrack until the last possible moment, because the smell and the noise and everything gets the adrenaline going too much. And I was in my hotel room, wandering up and down, dressed up like a racing driver does, and feeling very nervous. And a young member of my family, who I'm going to introduce you to in a minute, went over to the telephone pad and scribbled a little note on the telephone pad and came and pushed it into my hand. And that was it.
Tell us
Now,
how old was he?
How old were you, Jason? So, Jason, stand up, please. Jason, the filmmaker, is the person who wrote that note. And what were you? 6? 7. 7? Yeah. And of course, he hadn't been at school very long, so he didn't know how to spell. But the advantage of not having been at school for very long was that although he didn't have the knowledge about spelling, he had the wisdom that soon gets knocked out of you at school. Yeah. Do you see what I mean? And we will come back to that tomorrow. I want to look at the balance between wisdom and knowledge. Very, very important thing. But an interesting thing happened, you know. I mean, what do you do when you get a note like that? You know, Jason was misguided enough. You know what it is. Those of you who've had children will know that your children think you're perfect until finally one day they discover that you're full of holes like everyone else. But I think Jason was under the illusion. Were you, Jason?
No, don't worry about that.
Under the illusion that I was sort of... So what I didn't want to do is to let him down. Didn't want to let him down by not doing well in this race. I couldn't do it for myself possibly, but I could do it for him. You know, this is the kind of what I felt. And I remember pulling on a cloak. It just felt like that. I just pulled on a cloak of self-belief. And I had a very strange reaction. Immediately I did that. Here am I in the hotel room. It's very strange. I felt sorry for the guy who was now going to finish second, who was the guy in the other car. Now, I knew the outcome of the race, literally. we had to go through the formality of the race because there were 30,000 spectators there waiting to see the race. But the outcome was obvious. Yeah? Now that was an extraordinary experience to me, to absolutely know what was going to happen. I won the race, got the lap record for that class of car and everything else. But I knew it was going to happen. Now that gave me a sense of the power of having total self-belief. Now I'm not saying you're going to get to that extreme condition that I did on that one occasion, but that is incredibly powerful stuff. If you truly believe in yourself, you can pretty well do anything. I like that quote of Tim's, and he realized that the opponent in your own head is more daunting than one on the other side of the net. Then you begin to understand what the game is. If you can get that bit handled, which is exactly what happened to me in that race, I got that bit handled, and then winning the race was the easy bit. And that's a quote from Tim. Here's just some pointers on effective questions, and let's just take a look at what we're asking questions for. If you're playing tennis, what's the most common instruction, actually in any ball sport, what's the most common instruction that you would hear from a coach? Pretty much any ball sport, what would they be saying to you? Pardon? Yeah, watch the ball, look at the ball, keep your eye on the ball, okay? So, well, that's an instruction, isn't it? Yeah? So, what could you say in a coaching way? Yeah, you could ask something about the ball that would cause them to look at the ball, wouldn't it? You could do that.
If there is something on the ball.
There are 2 points here, because if it's just watch the ball, and they do that, so somewhere in their field of vision is a ball, and you ask them, are you watching the ball? They're going to say, oh yeah, I can see the ball. Okay? But there's no increased awareness, is there? It's just in their field of vision. So what you've got is the first line here. You've got their attention on the ball. Okay, but it's only their attention. Now what might you do? Can I have a victim, a volunteer for a moment? Who would be willing to come out and kind of catch with it?
No, it can't be anybody. It has to be. No, it has.
Come on, thank you.
Oh, it can't be anybody. All right. Good luck.
So, would you go over there and we'll just play catch with this ball? So if I just say watch the ball, you know, I'm going to assume that he's watching the ball or he wouldn't catch it, right? So now I want to get him to watch it in a more detailed way. What could I say to him now to get him to watch it in a more detailed way?
Which way is it spinning? The comment.
Give me several of those.
How high?
Look at it, what's the order?
How high does it go? You said something?
Which way is it spinning?
Which way is it spinning? Okay. Anything like that will increase the attention, won't it? So this time, tell me which way is this spinning? Round this way. Okay. On this occasion. Okay. So on this occasion, how many times approximately from when it leaves my hand to when it reaches yours?
So side spin 4 times.
Okay. So you see what I mean? As soon as you're getting him to look at the detail, what does he have to do to be able to give me an answer is to go into more detail. That's increasing the awareness, right? And that is what we call this. It's focus now for high. Okay, that's fine. Thank you. You must be exhausted. So what we've got to do with coaching is get to what I would call level 2 here. Because if you're just looking at the ball, well, you're pretty much the way anyone else does it. But it's when you're looking at it in more detail, you're getting more accurate information, to oversimplify this. You're getting more accurate information that's feeding back into your system, and then you swing the racket or kick it or whatever you do with it. You've got higher quality information about exactly where the ball is, essentially, right? So that higher quality, you're going to be more accurate. So what I'm saying is, it's so important to get this higher awareness, because you see some people in coaching, they stop at the level that they got the person's attention there. Yeah? Have to go beyond that for more detail, more precision. Yeah, Tim, do you want to add to that?
Yes. When you get into detail, you're also going by their first definition of what they're seeing. So if it's a ball and it looks like a threat, because they're looking at it through the context of, can I hit it back or not? So it looks, the definition of the ball is a threat. If you say, watch the way the seams spin, you say, oh, I've never looked at that before. And they don't act, they act as a ball instead of, so same thing in a circumstance. Person's telling you generally what's happening, you start to ask some detail, and their voice will change, their objectivity will change.
There's a principle here. It's very often more useful to demonstrate in something that's visual and clear, but let me just run through for that. We've talked about this before. Your questions need to be non-judgmental, neutral. It's just, what is it you're seeing? It's not right or wrong, it's what do you see? And what you've got is a feedback loop here, because they're giving a response, and if somebody says it spins twice, and I saw it spin 5 times, then that tells me that your awareness is limited, okay? So I would not say, no, you're wrong. I would say something like, I saw that a bit differently. Have another look. Now, what are they going to do now? They're going to pay more attention, okay? So let's take that forward and just look at a business example. I told you this story yesterday about when I was working with McKinsey, and I stayed right away from content because I couldn't understand the language. They were talking Greek, you know. And you know, here's a way of taking it from what I would call level 2, taking it into level 2. You see, the basic question in the goal, for example, is what do you want? But what do you want is level 1. Okay, it's just what do you want? But as soon as you add in words like that, more, what more do you want? Or what exactly do you want? What precisely is it? As soon as you get to that word, you're taking them a little deeper than they go. But you're still not going into content. You know, this is still a generic, but you get them to go into more depth. And that's a very, very useful thing. So don't complicate it. Just add in words that takes them to that second step. And I think that's such an important part of that, because that's where the increased awareness comes. So there's lots of words you can add in here. Okay, just quickly to have a look at this. What are we doing? Ask, listen, and observe, because you want to see if there's a relationship between what they say, as I've just said 3 times or 5 times, what are you seeing in them, and so on. And then clearly open questions. Because if you ask a question that's just yes or no, 50% they're going to get it right, isn't it? So it's a very easy thing to answer. Well, yes or no. Did you see the ball? What are people going to say? Yes, I did. Okay, so that's not helpful at all. Okay, so we go into, you know, what is a particularly good word, or when, and that focuses on that.
So when you're asking these questions, what do you want to know? What do you find? What are you observing? And you get to observe how they're observing. As a coach, that's very interesting to you. You don't know that. You may know what's happening in great detail, but you don't know how they're seeing it. And it's how they're seeing it that is going to affect what you say next.
Would you avoid why questions?
Well, we're just going there, and let me just put that in right there. We're following their interest, which is you're on their agenda, which is obvious. But the caution, I would certainly say, it's not a never to say why. But what is when you are asked in certain circumstances, or particularly when you're a child, you are asked, why did you do that? What's actually happening there?
You get the feeling of uneasiness, you're being judged.
Yeah. It's sort of, have I done something wrong?
Put the client.
Yeah. It's not a neutral thing. There's an implicit criticism in there. You know, how could you word a why question without using why?
Tell me more.
Yeah. Or you could say, very simple, why did you do that? Could be, what was the reason for that choice? Now we go to neutral again. Yeah. See what I mean? You can move around. And and the other one is how. You know, how was that? I mentioned that one yesterday. You've done a presentation. You know, your coach wasn't there, and they say afterwards, how did that go? Well, fine. Nowhere to go with that. But, you know, what did you do well? You know, what was the bit that you got stuck on? Anything like that. And you got something to work on, okay? One of the things that does happen in particularly sort of workplace situations is that people expect to be told. You know, some people will go to their first tennis lesson or their first ski lesson, and they expect to be told, and it's quite daunting to actually find out that they're not going to be told anything. And I think that you know, one has to be very attentive to that. And the way to do that is to give some tell. And actually, children are wonderful to give you feedback about your coaching, because I say there are three types of children. There are 2-question children, 3-question children, and 4-question children. So if they're doing their homework or something, and you know, you can ask them, well, what are you going to focus on in the homework that you've got to do? And they're fine with that question. And then you ask a second question, and they may be okay with that. The third time you ask a question, they say, stop asking me these stupid questions, Dad, and give me the answer. And actually, it's very good feedback, because they're telling you that they need a balance in here. They do need some information. And one of the things we find in managers who are converted to, you know, let's say they've been very prescriptive in their management in the past, and they got coaching now as the new management style. And so all they do with their team is say, well, what do you think? You know, it drives the team crazy. I mean, if somebody asks you what time it is, tell them the time. Don't say, what do you think it is, you know? So it's a balance here. There's not a sort of absolute here. Some people get to sort of rules of coaching. One thing that some coaches do sometimes is they have a couple of questions under their arm. So if I get stuck, I'll come out with this question. You know. Now what are they doing then when they're coaching the other person?
They're thinking to themselves.
Yeah, they're thinking, they're looking after themselves, and they're not really listening to the answer to the previous question, because they're, in a sense, waiting the opportunity to produce what their backup system is. They're not with the other person. And what we really need to do is to let the person finish what they're saying without beginning to think what your next question is, and trusting that the next question will follow out from that, rather than preparing ahead of time, in which case you're not with them, you're with yourself.